Hey everyone, Mr. Schleicher here with another chemistry video. Today we're going to learn how to name and write the formulas of covalent or molecular compounds. So we're going to name covalent compounds first of all. So this is actually going to be a super easy and fast lesson. There's just a few things we need to remember here. The first background information that we need is knowing exactly what a covalent compound is. A covalent compound is any compound that's formed by a nonmetal and another nonmetal. So before with ionic compounds, we were looking at things like polyatomic ions. We were looking at things like metals with like nonmetals. But with our covalent compounds, we'll have a nonmetal with another nonmetal. So maybe like nitrogen and oxygen, or oxygen chlorine, or fluorine and sulfur. Basically, we're sticking in this area of the periodic table. Don't forget hydrogen is also a nonmetal when we're talking about covalent compounds. All right, so how do we look at a formula and then name it? Well, with covalent compound naming, we're always going to be using prefixes, or the stuff that comes at the beginning of a word. The prefix in our names are going to represent the number of that type of element in the compound. And of course, it'll be shown as a subscript in that formula that we're reading. These are the prefixes for the following number of atoms. If you have one of something, you might describe it as mono, kind of like a monorail. 2, the prefix is di, if you have 2 of something. 3 is tri, like a tricycle. 4 is tetra, kind of like the blocks in Tetris, which always have 4 blocks. 5 is penta, like a pentagon or a pentagram. 6 is hexa, like a hexagon. 7 is hepta, like a heptagon. 8 is octa, like an octagon. And then 9 and 10 are a little more obscure, but they still happen. 9 is nana, like a nonagon. And then 10, the prefix for having 10 of something is deca, like a decagon. So try to use your prior knowledge as much as possible. These are prefixes you have to memorize. So, the best way to do that is probably doing all the practice problems or just using your prior knowledge. Okay, so what is a method for naming these formulas here? Well, you're going to have your first element name, but then you'll put a prefix in front of it to say how many you have. And then you'll have your second element name with a prefix in front of it to say how many you have, but then you'll change the ending to "-ide", just like with ionic compounds. Now, there's a few little specific rules that we'll see come up from time to time, and this is just how chemistry works. Don't ask me why they name it like this. I didn't make up these rules, but we have a special rule here that we're never going to use the mono prefix if you're just talking about the first nonmetal. So the first thing here, we would never use mono. Mono never goes here. If you have one of something, you just say the name of that and you have no prefix. The second special rule we have to keep track of is that if we ever have an oxide and the oxide prefix ends with an A or an O, we will cut off that A or that O. It just sounds better when you say it, and then when you search up the actual name of that chemical, you'll find that they often cut off the A or the O, 99% of the time. So let's look at some examples together. Here we have N2O4. So the name of this is, we're going to look at the number that we have. We have 2 of these nitrogens. The prefix for 2 is di, and then N is of course nitrogen. We have 4 oxygens, so the prefix for 4 of something was tetra, and then oxygen becomes oxide. However, we do have to follow our second special rule here, and because A came before oxide, we're cutting off the A. So this is going to be erased, and this is now dinitrogen tetroxide. All right, next example, CO. So for the first compound, sorry, for the first element, we have carbon. You might think, hey, let's say monocarbon, because mono is a prefix for one of something. However, we do not use mono for the first element. So we are just going to say carbon. Sorry, my A looks really strange here. Carbon. And then over here, we have an oxygen. Oxygen becomes oxide. Since there's one oxygen, we say mono, oxide. However, remember, if we have an O or an A before oxide, we cut that off. So, goodbye O. The official name of this compound is carbon monoxide, which, you gotta set your detectors at night because that can kill you. Our next example here is SF6. S is sulfur. We don't have to use a prefix if there's one thing at the front. F is fluorine. The prefix that means you have 6 fluorines is hexa. And then the name fluorine, since it's the second element, becomes fluoride. Always change the ending to "ide" with these. Next example, we have Cl2O3. Okay, it looks like chlorine's coming first, and since there's 2 of them, we have to use a prefix of di, that means 2. Then we could say chlorine, dichlorine. For the first element, make sure you're keeping the ending the same. It does not end with "ide." For the second element, now we have tri for 3 of them, and then oxide. Because oxygen becomes oxide. In this case, we do change the ending with the second one. Something I want you to notice is that we do not cut off the I. Even though it comes before oxide, I stays in place. Next example, SiH4. Si is silicon. We don't need a prefix since there's 1 of them. And then H is hydrogen, which does become hydride. There's 4 of them, so we use the prefix tetra. So the name of this compound is silicon tetrahydride. All right, so as long as you know your prefixes and you know how to look up elements in the periodic table, then you should be good for this one. Just know that there's these random 2 special rules where you never use mono for the first element, and then you cut off the A or the O if oxide follows it. Also, don't forget your second element, you do have to change the ending to "ide." Okay, let's go on to our next section here. How do you go from one of these names to a chemical formula? Well, as long as you know your prefixes, this is almost even easier than before. This first example, we have diphosphorus pentoxide. Okay, so you just look at your prefix and in what element we're talking about. Di means 2 of something, phosphorus means P, so we're going to say P2. And then penta means you have 5 of something, oxide is oxygen, so we'll say O5. Diphosphorus pentoxide is P2O5. In this next example, we have bromine triiodide. No prefix usually means you have 1 of something. And of course, we know bromine is Br. So we have Br with no subscript. Here we have triiodide. Tri means 3. Iodide is this iodine. So we're going to say I3. Finally, we have tetraarsenic hexoxide. All right, tetra means 4 of something. Arsenic, it might take a second to look up, but it is As. And then hex oxide. Hex means 6 of something. Oxide is oxygen. So we're going to have As4O6. All right, that's all there is to it. Writing the names of and writing the formulas of covalent compounds. Ask your teacher if you still have any questions, and make sure to complete some practice problems to really solidify your understanding. Until the next one.